Frank, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Simon. Good to talk to you.
That's good, mate. So Frank
Yeah.
Griffo from Griffo Botanicals, and now Frank, we met each other a number of years ago. We were introduced in your beautiful warehouse, factory, dispensary, clinic in Petaluna, right? Yeah,
Yeah, we kind of
beautiful.
do it all here. So before the pandemic, I've been practicing in Berkeley for about 17 years. And then just before the pandemic hit, I had moved everything into this one facility. So my clinic, production, office space for the botanical side of the business all moved here. And then the pandemic hit, and then we were really focused right here. So, and you came in a couple years later, got to see our facility, the clinic in the front, and then production facility in the back.
Yeah, I was so impressed. It's not often that I'm impressed. I'm a bit of a stickler when it comes to quality and things like that. So I was impressed. So that was really, really great. And so since then, you've been doing all sorts of stuff. We've been catching up in San Diego at the symposiums and seeing each other around. Played a game of basketball where I got completely annihilated, but that's always nice and embarrassing for an Australian against the American. But let's play cricket or something like
It
that.
is our sport. You put
It
me
is
on
the
Australian
sport.
rules football and you'll work me over, I'm
That's
sure.
right. And Andy Ellis obviously introduced us. He's just been amazing in connecting everyone in the industry, and he was able to connect us. So I'm really grateful for him to bring us together, and for also kicking my backside in basketball once again.
Yeah, well, Andy's great, and I do appreciate him introducing us, and he's been supportive for people to come up in the business and kind of paving the path for us, people like us, for sourcing really great herbs and showing us the way to make high quality products for people. It's
All
been
right.
really nice to have him in the conversation over
Yeah.
the years.
Frank, so you started the care range. So what inspired this to kind of go off from Griffo Botanicals and the rest of the offerings that you had there? What was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, well, I started, Simon, back in '09. I started making tinctures for my patients. They really liked them. Compliance was good, and I was getting good clinical results from them. And I just had a couple at first, and then that line expanded and grew and eventually turned into its own business. But for a long time, I was just making it for my patients. Because I'm a clinician and running a clinic, I see that there's a lot of women coming in with women's health issues, and I can pick a product here, a product there, a Griffo this, a something else, make a custom formula. But there was nothing out there that really was designed inside and out for women. It was really just having to cherry pick formulas from different people. And I wanted to create something that was beautiful, potent, easy to take, and effective for women's health. And I just didn't see anything on the market like that.
When it comes to tinctures, there's all different sorts. I've never really learnt a lot about tincture manufacturing. Obviously, we've done a lot of other things. I've done a lot of the other things in my time in clinic, and I'm just wondering what differentiates it, what makes it so unique in terms of its administration.
Well, you're really familiar with SANs,
Mm,
traditional herbal powders, and the more surface area by taking powders and grinding them up means that patients can take less total herbs per dose. And that's actually how I started my practice, is I was grinding herbs into fine powders and then putting them into large tea bags for patients and giving them the doses that way. Eventually, I was like, well, I can just make it into a liquid for them. And then that's where the tincturing kind of was born. The tinctures, because they're part alcohol, part water, in the method I've developed over the last decade, it's all warmed up, but not hot. And we run all the solvent, the alcohol and water, through these ground up herbs. So we get all the active ingredients, energy, potency out of the herbs in a really concentrated way. And it just makes it easy for patients to take it, is the main thing.
I've seen how people soak herbs in alcohol, and that kind of, I mean, it seems to me there isn't a flow through. So you do this, like you said, flow through, right? So can you
Yeah.
explain a little bit without obviously giving away your IP? Is there anything that you can share
Yeah.
that sort of demonstrates how you do them a little bit differently than just people just take them in a barrel and just soak them in alcohol, right? And
Right,
that's
right. So what
is
you're
that
describing
really
is a yeah, what you're
manufacturing that?
describing is a maceration. That's like the
Okay.
traditional tincturing process. At home, people would take like a mason jar and put some herbs in it, cover it in alcohol, and let it sit for
Mm,
90 days, shaking it. And I mean, that's great and all, but you're limited because you need enough alcohol to cover the herbs. And as you well know, some of the herbs are really bulky.
mm,
And when you get to like a Jinyanhua, Pu Gong Ying, all kinds of herbs, they take up a lot of space. And so you need alcohol to cover them all. So your ratio of herb to alcohol is going to be really high ratio. It's going to be like a 1 to 5, 1 to 7. And that's how the vast majority of tincture manufacturers make their herbs. You take a drum, you fill it full of herbs, you cover it with alcohol, you stir it once a week for 90 days, and then you press it out, and that's your tincture. That's gonna be about a 1 to 5, 1 gram of herbs to 5 milliliters solvent. With our process, it's more like a shot of espresso to the other drip coffee. So what I'm doing is I'm grinding the herbs up to a fine powder, packing them into a column, and then running my solution through that. So the alcohol is actually going through the herb particles, through the cells, and not around them. So I don't have to rely on pressing. I don't have to rely on time. The solvent is actually going through the cells of the herbs and pulling it out. And, we have ways we test our solution at the end to make sure we're getting everything out. We'll take the spent herbs and test them. But the biggest thing is I just look at the herbs, I taste them, I look at them, and there should be no color and no flavor left.
All gone into the liquid.
Yeah.
All been
Yeah.
extracted.
So that's basically how we're extracting our herbs. And in that way, we're able to get a really concentrated ratio, like around 1 to 1.5 versus most people's 1 to 5. Yeah.
Wow, you get it that strong. I was wondering why they're so strong.
Yeah, if I go any stronger than that, we're going to start getting a lot of precipitation out of solution. You're going to end up with a lot of junk in the bottom of the bottle. And just with mechanically how things work, I don't want to leave anything left in the herbs. I'm pretty meticulous about all this stuff. I mean, you saw the lab.
Oh, yeah.
Like everything's organized and labeled and clean. And so part of the extraction process too, for me, is just I'm almost fastidious about like wanting to make sure I get everything out of those herbs. I don't want to heat it up too much. I don't want to filter it too much. I don't want to grind it too fine or too coarse, because we need just these exact proportions to get the best extraction.
And that's sort of where I was so impressed. But I think people who are listening are going to be. I thought this was pretty good because you made this stuff. Like you built all these. I was like, wait a second. Asking your wife, did Frank make that as well? And she's like, yep, they made that. you actually make all this equipment on top of this. Not only do you make the tinctures and do everything, you actually made the equipment to make the tinctures that make the product. Like it's
pretty meta, right? Like I had to back up and I had to learn to weld stainless steel so we could make some of the equipment, because you can't just buy the stuff off the shelf, Like I had to.
Well, that's what we got into Chinese medicine for, so you can learn how to weld stainless steel. And this is what I love about you, Frank, is that you take it to this level. This is very, very impressive.
I just, there just wasn't anything on the market. Like no one was doing this, and I was like, this is just the best method. Like and I've talked to people from different extraction industries, and people are like, well, you're getting that's good. Like you don't need to change a thing. And we learned herbs, but also had to learn some phytochemistry to be like, oh, what's the difference between extracting an alkaloid like ephedrine, right, it comes out in alcohol, versus polysaccharides, which are water soluble. So I had to make sure that we're getting everything out. And that's part of the reason a classical decoction is you're boiling things so much, because it's really hard to get some of those active ingredients out in just water. And so we end up with a lot of evaporative loss during boiling. So we have to use larger quantities to account for that. So by doing powders, by doing a closed loop system, we're able to get everything out without the waste.
It's really interesting. Also, when it comes to the current manufacturing with extract concentrations, granulations, and things like this, you look at things like minerals. I mean, minerals are the ones that really come up with this question. Like, it's just, you just don't get the result out of these minerals. Most minerals these days, even at world leading extract companies, are still just using, as a standard ratio, just throw the longo into the tub and just let it sit, let it boil for 10 minutes. And then we're just going to pull off the liquid and mix it with some sort of carrier. You just do not get the result. It's either just powder, like just straight up fine ground powder, like in a lot of manufacturing, or it is just nothing, and not even powder. They're just carrier, just to stabilize the water and the little bits of fiber that they got from the tiny particles of the minerals. And I was learning recently from one of these manufacturing practitioners, and he was telling me that the best quality of the granules now that's coming out of different countries for minerals is this kind of initial alcohol. And I know this is not a traditional way of doing it, but neither is granules. I mean, granules been around 50, 60 years. So you can't say, oh, it's not traditional, because this is part of developing compliance and
Yeah.
ability and all these things. So
Right.
this I mean, I'm a purist for sure when it comes to herbal
Mhm.
medicine, but
Good.
there are little bits that we are adapting, and sort of, we need to have that level of flexibility when we're using it. So okay, if we're having flexibility, how can we develop that as best as possible?
Right. No, I
So
agree with you. I'm a bit of a classicist too. Like I believe in the old texts. I
mm,
believe in those old formulas and those extraction methods. And what we've created here is a springboard off of the Sans from the Wei Lun and stuff like that during that time period when the Sans were really popular because herbs were expensive and they had to get them to people. And now that we have, different technology, different accessibility, alcohol is a lot cheaper than it used to be. And so it wasn't really a thing that people did back then. So we're able to take this and now we understand, a bit of phytochemistry and be like, oh, these different active ingredients and they require different things to really get a good solution rather than just boiling it like crazy until we know everything's out. So our process is more like a little more nuanced
mm,
and subtle. Like I have to make adjustments, like you're saying, the minerals, the longu, the muli, the digesture. I have to extract those differently. I have to extract Swansell Wren differently, because it's the heavy oil based thing.
yeah.
And then, we've got all the classic formulas with Shengjiang in it. I can't throw that into my columns. I have to do those differently. So we have a different method for almost all of our formulas, which drives my staff crazy because, and I'm always tweaking things too. So they're like, wait, we did it this way last time. I'm like, yeah, but if we make this little minor adjustment, it's going to be that much better.
Product development.
No, it's been,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been, I was making it in the clinic for like 6, 7 years. And then now I've been making it for the business for, close to 10 years. And it's been this iterative process of like getting it better and better and better.
And so
So
with
it's a lot of fun.
yeah, I mean, this is obviously going to create a lot more purity, and obviously it creates purity because you're looking at these herbs as individuals. We haven't been really look at these formulas individually, and certainly in modern extraction, there's not many companies who look at it as an individual herb. They're just like, let's just standardize this thing as much as possible to comply with different regulations. But we have to understand that each of these herbs has individual properties, that we treat that individually. And I know certain companies will have standard operating procedures for individual herbs, and that's great. But for the vast majority, it's just do this the same way each time. So the fact that you're taking
Right.
time is very unique as well.
Just want to reiterate real quick with that, Simon,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that we extract our formulas as formulas. So I'm not doing individual herb extraction. Again, as
yeah.
a classicist, I'm like, oh, the formulas need to be made together. I can't just have a warehouse full of individual single herb extractions and mix them together. We need to do them together as a unit. So I believe strongly in that. But as a formula, we have to tweak them a little bit here and there, and we need to extract them differently
Mm, mm.
individually. 99% is done as a formula.
Yeah. Okay. And so I was just thinking that new it's very much geared towards this kind of modern clinic needs, right? So have you got any examples of how practitioners, like, what's their feedback from like the contemporary health presentations that shaped these formulas? Like, is this how it sort of evolved in the sense of, okay, we need to kind of modernize this, but also with the patient's current needs?
Yeah, I think so. How it evolved was, like I mentioned before, like I'm seeing the vast majority of acupuncturists are women, vast majority of patients are women, and yet there's nothing out there designed for them that
Mm,
they're going to pick up and that providers are going to be proud to hand their patients, and the patients are going to be excited to take home and be like, oh yeah, this is beautiful. I'm going to put it on my counter. I'm going to take it. It's,
mm,
give me this. I'm going to get better. So I started with that mindset. And then I started to look at what am I seeing in the clinic for women's health
mm,
that women are coming in with, and just kind of did a little bit of an audit and review of like what's my experience as a clinician over 20 years and what's kind of the modern condition that women are coming in with and what do they need. And we're seeing a lot of infertility, we're seeing menstrual cramps, pain, menopause, some things like that beg for a more directed formula presentation to address these symptoms.
mm.
So I took standard of care for some of these symptoms, applying them to pattern differentiation, and then created these formulas.
So you can sort of you can fit the whole range into a practitioner's toolkit, right? These days, it's kind of like, are they supposed to be standalone formulas, or are they they designed to be, sorry, they designed to be standalone formulas, or sort of you use it in combination with the classic
Yeah. Well,
formulation?
this is where the formulation craft comes into play.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's in all of our more modern formulas, I have to craft a formula that will address the dominant pattern differentiation for a particular symptom
Mm,
without making the other patterns worse. So if someone misuses the product, if they come in with menopause, kidney yin deficiency, okay, we can give them Arshantong or Liu Wei Diwanwan. But if they're coming in with kidney yin deficiency, with spleen qi deficiency, and I have a whole bunch of shu di in there or something like that, and it's going to give them all this gastro upset, I don't want to do that. So I have to craft the herb choices really carefully to make them so that they will cover the vast majority of cases coming in. So that's kind of my mindset as I'm putting together these formulas so that they can be directed without causing undue harm for the provider that's just busy and needs something they can pull off the shelf and give their patient and not have to get into the nitty gritty of herbs every single time throughout their day.
mm, mm, mm. So I know we talked about processing at the start of this conversation, but I was thinking more about like, so, I do a lot of focus in product discernment, like quality discernment and sourcing. So where do you guys, what's your philosophy behind that? Sort of like the field to bottle kind of concept. It's becoming so important. And I think that, if we can focus so much on one side of the business, but if we're not sort of considering that whole thing, do you take into account that sort of thing when you're making these products?
Yeah. Business for me is building relationships. And, same is true in my practice too. It's like, we have these patients who come in, but I've had patients I've known for 15 years now. And building the herb side of the business has been a process of finding other companies we believe in, we want to support, we want to work with, we believe they are providing the best quality. And, it's just a sense of community, really. It's this really, distant sense of community. Now for us, it used to be in our town, but now it's spreading around the world. And so we really believe in working with people that we trust and they're creating really good products and changing the industry. So our suppliers are the same way. The people we get our herbs from are giving us the best quality herbs we can get. They're highly tested for contaminants across the entire range. And then, we do our extraction process and then we test again after the fact to make sure our products are pure when we're done. It's a challenge in our industry, the herb sourcing. It's a big business. It spans the world where these herbs are sourced from. And we want to choose carefully that they're raised ethically, that it's coming from, ethical businesses that are producing a good product. And, that takes time to weed out people. I'm telling you, we've had a lot of suppliers, everything from label printing companies to bottle suppliers to herb suppliers that we said, yeah, we just don't want, they have the cheaper product, but we don't want to work with them. So we're going to go pay more somewhere else because we like working with these other people and want them in our life.
I'm glad to hear that, man, because we're in the healthcare industry, and the health it extends beyond just the individual person.
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's the community, it's everyone overseas, it's the water systems, it's the air systems, it's the avoiding the pesticide industries, the fertilizer industries, like the chemical fertilizer industries. You see. You go to farms and you see, okay, what are your costs? And they say, oh, our costs for seeds are this much, and that's 10%. And our cost for labor, this is, 10%. And our cost for shipping and transport, that's 5%. And our cost for pesticides and fertilizers, that's 40%. And you're like, whoa, what? So who's in control here? Like who's really controlling the industry? Like 40%. Yeah, yeah. And you're completely dependent on them every year. Yep. Okay. All right. Maybe time to shift your farming practices. Because it extends all the way back to every single, it affects every single person on this planet. So yeah, not just healing the person, it's healing the planet.
Yeah, it is. It's having a smaller impact. Doing things well will, cultivate our environment properly, and everyone will benefit from the farmers growing it to the end user who's using it. And that's just what we want to be a part of. We use everything as locally sourced as possible. So our alcohol comes from in town here. Labels come from in the state. Bottles are supplied in country. The herbs get taken back to my property and composted and turned into soil. And for a while there, I was growing as many herbs as I could. But then I had to decide, well, I'm not really a farmer.
Yeah.
So I got to put that aside because I'm also seeing patients and trying to make herbs and,
Yeah.
everything else and, be a father and a husband. And so I had to put the farming aside for a while there, but
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, there's bigger principles at work when it comes to herbs as well, isn't it? The Dowdy Yao Chai, the original growing region. You can't grow everything in California as much as you could.
no, you can't.
Yeah, it's nice, but there are people around who will say, "Hey, I've got such and such growing this herb and such growing that herb, and we can support them where we are. There's certain universities that are doing good projects and looking at alcohol and showing how they can grow in different areas. But again, it's just a small selection of herbs and very very low quantities as well. So but people
Yeah,
understand that how beautiful these regions are in China. They grow particular herbs, or in Taiwan or in Southeast Asia now. Like they're supporting pretty amazing communities as well. On a global scale, and it's something we should be supporting as much as possible.
yeah, I agree. The domestic market for growing herbs is still in its infancy, but it's growing, if you will. And it's a good option for some farmers because most herbs are perennials and they can kind of dedicate a side of land or a border of land or something like that to grow some of these herbs and then harvest them in a few years as like an adjunct income. The problem is with all these herbs, they tend to be very labor intensive, and we're just not set up here in the Western world to have people processing herbs, doing the doyao and stuff like that to get them ready for sale.
Yeah, I mean, and the skill set to grow these herbs with their particular needs, and to get those levels of active ingredients in them, or the base minerals in the soil, or there's like we talked before, like you were talking about, why you use the herbs as as formulations, right? There's synergy, there's invisible things that we don't know, we can't measure, that happen. There's an alchemic process that happens in that, and there's also an alchemic process that happens based on the geology and the astrology of the particular area as well. I think is misunderstood. I was talking with a teacher of mine, and he was asking me about. He's a Buddhist monk, and he was talking about this concept of Tao Te. I was talking to him about that, but he has that concept. So his base is in Ayurvedic. Sort of, there's like an Ayurvedic background to his medicine, and he was talking. He's like, Tao Te, Simon, what's this Tao Te? What's this original growing region stuff? And he was saying that. He said there's a new concept of that. It's not only is it that the plants grown in that region, it's that same concept can be applied to the individual. So the individual's need. So the same thing is like why you eat watermelon in summer, or you eat, broth in winter. These sort of same principles as well. It goes beyond just the herb. It goes on to the individual, the person as well.
Does. And that's funny because those are one of my examples. I always talk to people who don't know herbs and don't quite understand these principles. I talk about watermelon summer. I talk about, like a stew in winter, or, people don't understand how herbs go to certain parts of the body. I'll talk about a jalapeno or a really spicy pepper because, people don't eat a spicy pepper and have their feet sweat or their knee, right? It goes up to the chest and the shoulders and the head. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of like how in Chinese medicine we talk about an herb goes to a certain part of the body, And when you drink a bunch of ginger tea, you feel this warmth in your belly, and that's different than if you're drinking the same quantity of mint tea. And so people have a way to reference these concepts that seems so familiar to us now. It seems foreign to people, but there's ways to kind of bridge that gap with basic foods and environment, right? Because we are of our place. We have a terroir to us. It's not just wine and herbs; it's people too.
Yeah, we've definitely lost that in the Western world. We think it's so common in Asia. I mean, it's just such a basic concept. If you brought this concept up with anyone in most Asian countries, they're just like, "What? You guys are just scratching the surface. Everyone knows this. Like, it's even seemed like a thing you should know. Like, it's like everyone knows."
Right.
Like, you wouldn't even mention it, and the fact that we
Right.
mention it in the West, it's so silly. But yeah, I love those. I love that you did a jalapeno, because I explained it as a sausage sandwich. Australia. So why do you mix onion with your sausage, right? That's because it's pungent and dispersing, and and sausage and bread is going to cause food stagnation. So you get this aromatic, pungent. It disperses those proteins. Wow, that's fascinating. I've never thought about it. So
That's funny because I talk about spices too on desserts. So like nutmeg, cinnamon, and some desserts and things,
right.
because it's dispersing and drying the cloying nature of some of the sweets.
Yeah. And people think you're just an absolute genius, right?
Right.
But-
Or nuts. Depends
yeah,
on the
or
person.
nuts, yeah. I'll never look at my dessert again the same way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when practitioners are sort of exploring your this range, is there, I think in Chinese medicine, like there's a lot of things that are sort of under the radar. There's formulas which we either forgot to work with, or that need this kind of resurgence. Is there anything that you think, like your clinical experience using these range, because you've obviously got the most amount of clinical experience using this range, and so that you go, this works so well. I wish more people knew about this, and you can sort of share it from that clinical perspective.
Yeah, well, I think Wager Fooling One is a really fantastic formula.
Mm,
But like I said, that needs to come with qualification because I am a classicist,
mm,
even though I've got these modern formulas here. It's from the Jingwei, and it's just a simple, elegant formula,
mm.
and warming the interior, draining damp, moving blood. And people always think of it for fibroids for women. But I mean, how many women come into the clinic with cold, damp chi and blood stagnation?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, it's a pretty relevant formula for a lot of people. It doesn't just need to be for fibroids. Dose dependent, you can ramp up the dose and use it for something like that, or you can give a smaller dose to get women's circulation going, reduce water retention, warm them up. It's a really relevant, beautiful, simple formula.
In your range,
That's
what's that called in your range?
within care,
Within care.
as it treats within.
Yeah.
It's an application of Guizhi Tong being
Mm.
modified to treat internal medicine, which, is another, probably my all-time favorite formulas is Guizhi Tong. The most simple of elegant formulas and
Yeah.
versatile.
Yeah. And they're just being used for thousands of years. There's, you don't have to be complicated.
Exactly.
My second favorite formula is Gunsao tongue. It's just Gunsao.
Right.
Amazing. Like it's just Gunsao.
Right.
And it's like, oh, it just works. It's okay. You don't have to
Yeah.
make a big mess of all these things and come up with all these theoretical concepts and make it look like a massive, beautiful 19th century poetry formula. You could just use Gunsao.
Right.
Use something simple,
Yeah.
Guizhi Wuling one, like Guizhi tongue,
Right.
Legion one. Like they're all super, super effective in their own right. I'm glad to see we're on the same page with that, because it's often overlooked.
They are, because they're too simple and people dismiss them.
Yeah.
Tong, Suwu Tong. They're like, oh, no, we use that as a base and add 3 other formulas to it. I'm like, no, look at the formula.
Yeah.
It's well-rounded. Our, medical ancestors created this formula with, a lot of sophistication.
Yeah, that's right.
And we don't need to be, turning things upside down and mixing things up all the time.
Mm. And so what's the future for NuCare? How do you envision that sort of evolving?
NuCare, like we started with these 10 formulas. I wanted to do the fertility phases, was my core. We based those on some standard formulas that are used in fertility, the Jane Littleton formulas. And so that was our 4, and then a couple of other things that people come in with a lot. So the menopause symptoms, pre-care for PMS, pain care for menstrual cramps, fem care as an external wash, and within care. And that's our 10 right there. That was kind of my basic, like, okay, this is gonna have a huge impact and be very versatile in most clinics focusing on women's health. And then we're gonna build out from there. I've got some formulas in line. Wenjing Tong, the Griffo Guipi Tong is super popular. We go through a lot of it. I want to make some tweaks to that to make it more appropriate specifically for women's health. And then I want to do a digestive one, which is probably just going to be a Shengjiang.
Mm. Mm.
Speaking of simple formulas.
Mm.
So those are kind of our 3 that we're looking at right now of expanding, and then we'll continue to expand there. One thing I do at this stage is, because I only see what I see in my clinic, but I love to hear back from our customers.
That's important.
When I do classes or do a talk somewhere, I love to hear back from people, be like, oh, do you make this? Do you make that? And that's really helpful for me, because I just add it to the list, and if I see it's in need, then I'm happy to make it.
Yeah, it's so important. I find the same thing, like when you talk with practitioners, they just have a completely different perspective. I mean, it might be like it might be just a different demographic of patient that you just don't see, and you could just learn so much from it, so much from it. And
Yeah,
you may not see, you may never have seen those formulas. And the same thing when people come to, you know, to our
yeah,
clinic. Well, like to share that information is so vital. It's the best way to learn. It's just such a
yeah,
great learning experience and just gives you that
yeah.
perspective.
I mean,
Um,
we were talking about people's kind of terroir earlier, and I use certain cough formulas in my clinic a lot. I use Qingqi Watanwan, Guala Zhishitang, for the vast majority of cough cases that come in because we just don't get a lot of dry cough in
mm,
my area.
mm.
I was talking to someone else. He had some cough formulas he was wanting me to make, and he lives up in high mountain area. It's super dry. Never uses phlegm
Mm,
formulas. It's
mm,
all like Shaoshan Maidongtong,
mm,
other formulas that are wetting and moistening the lungs because
mm.
that's what he sees.
Yeah,
And I think, women's health, fertility, all that's true too.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the best thing about Chinese medicine, isn't it? It's just that's why it's just evolved over these. That's why it's just so broad because there's just so many regions, so many areas, so many little
Yeah.
microclimates that people just been sitting in this one little microclimate forever and just developing this really amazing formula for that particular area,
Yeah.
and then you just bring it to somewhere else in the world. It's like, oh yeah, that's this, and it's just so simple. It's just what a wonderful medicine. It just blows my
Yeah.
mind every day.
Yeah. It's
So
beautiful. Yeah.
so great to be in this industry. It's just constantly
Yeah.
learning. Hey, it's just
Yeah.
yeah, and you got to
Yeah.
get once you keep your mind once your mind opens up, it's actually probably the biggest problem is keeping it closed. Because it's expanding. It's like it's just this never-ending um labyrinth that you're like, where am I gonna sort of rake
Yeah.
this back? At what point am I gonna?
Yeah, there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down.
Oh man.
And as you've heard me, I've gone down a lot of them myself. So,
Mm, mm, mm.
um, I just, I love crafting formulas, writing the formula, and making them into the best extract that I can.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
welding
just
the
what I
same
want to keep
welding the
doing
same
for
way.
as many people as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And and innovating, mate. Like it's like I said before, it's pretty cool. You've made all this stuff from scratch. I mean, that's really, the difference between any of these, massive companies to people who are just, doing it, getting their hands dirty and actually making these things. It's rare. So I'm privileged to chat with you, and it's not often that we kind of bring people on to talk about different things. So that I mean, for me, that's yeah, it's I'm excited to see someone like you exist in the world, which is really good. So it's great to know you're around. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm happy to, get to know another herbal brother. We're very like-minded in this respect and very, meticulous and want the best quality and get down to the nitty-gritty on everything. So it's
Yeah,
really nice to share on all this with you.
for sure. All right, Frank. Thanks so much, mate. And yeah, we'll no doubt catch up in somewhere in the States, or you'll come to Australia. Who knows?
We'll come to Australia. You invited us down and it
Yeah.
sounds great. We'd love to get out there.
Yeah, for sure. All right,
Yeah.
mate. You take care. Thanks again.
Okay. All right, man.